Woden's Day. Yeah? Celebrate your Norse gods. If you are a Norse god follower, today is the day of Odin. Right? And Thursday, the day of Thor, and Friday, the day of Frigga, Thor's mother, Odin's wife. But today, Woden's Day, Wednesday, Odin's Day. Anyway, hope you're all having a good day, and that whatever you're doing good. And real quick, just to give you a summary of some thoughts, not just about the markets, but also about the markets. Some things you never can tell. What do I mean by that? It's the beauty of geometric Brownian motion, folks. Sometimes geometric Brownian motion can be a real PETA. And if you know what a PETA is, you know what the acronym stands for. It's a real PETA. Right? Sometimes it'll throw a loop at you that you weren't expecting, curveball, smack you in the face or whatever, and can ruin your day. But at the same time, it can also throw a curveball at you that you weren't expecting and totally make your day. These things happen sometimes. Right? Depends on the curveball, or the slider, or the fastball, or whatever the pitch is. Right? It depends on the geometric Brownian motion that happens as that object is moving through a space. Now, when it comes to trading, geometric Brownian motion is incredibly useful because you can tell when an asset is on a random walk, which it is most of the time. Kind of like the walk I'm on now. If it's in a trending move, we can also see that. How can we tell if an asset is on a random walk or a trending move? Well, we can use entropy. What? Entropy? Yes. We can measure entropy, and the fine indicator makers at Alpha Trading have made a most exquisite set of entropy indicators. They've made a straight entropy indicator that shows you whether the asset is on a random walk or a trending move. Go figure how they did the math and the development on that, but they did because they're awesome. And they figured out a bunch of other useful things like correlations and the alpha squared entropy power percentile and the entropy oscillator. The other two, the Shannon entropy and the alpha squared entropy power percentile, those are the correlations that tell you, when used in conjunction with the entropy indicator itself, they tell you the direction of the asset, just like volatility does with the Pearson correlation used on the data set. So that means that entropy doesn't just tell you when an asset is in a random walk or a trending move. And by the way, if you were to calculate it, you'll see very easily. You can just eye it, frankly, it's very obvious. About 4/5 of the time, roughly 80%, it's in a random walk. And what is in a random walk? Any asset on any time frame. Most of the time, sometimes they're 60 plus or minus, sometimes they're 80, sometimes they're 90 plus or minus. But most of the time, it's around 80% of the time. Assets on any given time frame are on a random walk. Hello there, I see you. I see your message. The rest of the time, when they're not on a random walk, guess what? They're in a trending move. So yes, assets are moving randomly in a random market most of the time, except for when they're not. And when they're not, it's because they are in a trending move. Hello, Mr. Drummond Hafi Hama Saleh. Hello to you. Peace be with everybody. Yeah, so that's the beauty of the entropy indicators from Alpha Trading. Extremely useful, by the way. What am I doing? I am on a random walk, talking about random walks and trending move. And those random walks are associated with geometric Brownian motion, or GBR, also known as randomness. And they were discovered by Mr. Brown, Robert Brown, many years ago. He was a botanist who noticed that the little things of a dandelion, for example, would move in a particularly random way through space. And he called that motion, Brownian motion. Well, he noticed that motion had certain randomness to it after, many experiments. And thus was born the idea of geometric Brownian motion. He noticed they moved in a geometric way, despite their randomness. So I'm talking about that because the way assets move on markets, right? I don't care if you're trading dollars, yen, stocks, oil, gold, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Solana, Ethereum, doesn't matter, right? It's there will be randomness the majority of the time. There is randomness. Right? It's about 80% of the time. And again, the other 20% of the time, roughly, when the asset's not on a random walk, it's in a trending move, right? Now that trending move can be increasing, like expanding, or contracting towards or away from a standard deviation band, for example. And the same thing with the correlation. The correlation can be expanding or contracting, and it can be increasing in relevance or decreasing in relevance on top of that. In addition to that, we also have entropy oscillators, right? When the entropy oscillator, just like the returns oscillator, can show you divergence between the entropy, right, and the data set. Why is that useful? Well, because just like the returns oscillator is useful, and that's really the most useful, but entropy oscillator can show you some really, really amazing divergences that you can front run, especially on low time frames. But in general, the main divergence indicator to use is the returns oscillator or the alpha laser returns. Either one of them, they're both really returns oscillators. Just one is a slightly more advanced version of the other, but they're both great. They both show you the returns, right? Increasing or decreasing above or below the mean. Why is that important? Well, because divergence, if you've ever traded with divergence, it has very little or nothing to do with things like the RSI. Okay, people look for the divergence between the RSI and the price action. That doesn't make any sense. The RSI is built on price action. How are you going to find divergence between price action and price action? It doesn't work. What's worse is RSI is such a bad math formula. It divides by 1. Right? Even a kindergartner knows if you divide by 1, you get the same number. Right? It's not doing anything. It's like multiplying by 1. It's ridiculous. So it's just, RSI is a very bad indicator. It's a really S-word indicator developed by a guy who was a failed architect and then a failed engineer. If you look him up. And so he went ahead and figured out, hey, I can make this indicator for traders and I can sell it to them. He did for a while. Sure made a bunch of money on it too. But, it's not a good indicator, certainly not in the world of quants, right? Quantitative analysis, quantitative trading. And those people use what we use. They use the VEPs. What are the VEPs? That's our acronym that we coined. And the VEPs stands for volatility, entropy, probabilities, and statistics. The EPS, VEPs, right? And why do they use those things? Well, because those are the things that are actually relevant mathematically to the machines, right? The bots that are running those trades. And how many trades are they running? Well, they run millions of trades per second, right? Millions of orders every second they run trades. And how do they do that? Well, they have huge bags. Right? They work for companies like Citadel or D.E. Shaw or other companies with tremendous amounts of capital available to run big trades. And relative to the size of their bag, each trade is small, right? For them, like a $10,000 or $100,000 position is tiny relative to the amount of capital that they have available for trading. So if they put 10 grand on the position, or 20 grand or 100 grand, in many cases, that's more than enough. Pretty much in all cases, that's more than enough to move the market, 1 or 2 little pips or little pixels or, percentages of a percent. And since they have great fees, like no fees because they're market makers and they already pay for order flow info, they're really not paying much of anything, if anything at all, for trade, right? Paying tiny, tiny amounts, really, if anything at all, because again, they're market makers. They're supplying the capital to the market for the trades. They just move the market and take their profit instantaneously, within like 0.2 seconds. It's like the average duration of their trades. How can that be? Well, because when they put in, $100,000 or $1 million on a market that can be moved for 50 grand or 100 grand or 300 grand, they're going to move the market. They know which direction it's going because they're moving it. And then they close the trade with a little bit of profit. They don't care if it continues to go in that direction or not. They have more capital to use for the next trade. That's all they care about, right? Winning trade after trade, right? They're not looking for a huge, massive trade to make their year. They're looking for tiny little trades, one after the other. Line them up and sink them, and don't stop. And that's how they operate, right? That's why they're called high-frequency trading firms, not low-frequency trading firms, right? They trade high frequencies. That means a lot of trades in a day. Many, many, many more trades in a day than most people will ever run in a lifetime. Right? If they run millions of trades per second, and they do, through their bots, how many millions of trades do you think the average human makes in their life? I can tell you the answer is less than 1 million. Okay? The average trader makes less than 1 million trades in their life, unless they're trading at a high-frequency trading firm, and those are not the average traders. The average trader is a retail trader who puts in about 5 grand into a bank account, a trading account, anywhere from like 3 to 10, with 5 being like the average. I mean, they can even put in as little as 500 in some accounts or 300 in some accounts, but the average is around 5 grand. And they proceed to get liquidated shortly thereafter, usually within 90 days, right? The old saying is they lose 90% of their capital within 90 days. Like 90% of traders lose 90% of their capital. The actual fact is 90% of all traders lose about 100% of their capital within about 60 days. Why? Because they use leverage, and they use insane amounts of leverage, right? They use so much leverage that at Alpha Trading, we have to constantly warn people to not use that kind of leverage. It's not helpful to them. It's just hurting them, right? We're constantly telling people that don't use leverage, don't use leverage you don't need to use, don't use, leverage you don't need. If you don't need to use leverage, don't use it. We're always saying that. You know why? Because most people use leverage they shouldn't be using. So, that's going to do it for now. I hope you're doing well, Mr. Gibran Hafiz Hamasaleh, and everybody else who's watching. Good to see you all. Feel free to subscribe and like and stuff like that if you want to see more about me talking about, stuff, things, whether it's trading or marketing, current events, whatever it might be. Do the social things, please, and tell YouTube that you want me to do more of this. And then if we start getting more, subscribers and whatever, then I'll start to bring on some more interesting people maybe to talk with me, have some interesting conversations about what they're doing in their respective fields. Because yeah, I haven't been in marketing and political stuff for more than 40 years, and been in Bitcoin since literally before there was Bitcoin. Um, been in crypto, specifically cryptography and cryptocurrencies, before there was Bitcoin. Yeah, I know some interesting people, and I'd be happy to invite them on if there's anyone for them to talk with, or anyone to enjoy hearing what they have to say. Anyway, that's gonna do it for now. See you guys later. Cheers.